Making a living off your passion is tough, especially in niche areas like hybrid production and videography. But it is possible. Over the years, I've found ways to merge client work with content creation, turning projects into sustainable revenue streams without burning out or sacrificing creativity. Through the Filmmaker Alchemy YouTube membership on this channel, I'll show you the tools, strategies, and mindset shifts that help me grow. Whether you're a freelancer looking for balance or a filmmaker seeking independence, this is your chance to learn and grow. Become a member today. Send me a link to that HDMI transmitter receiver combo. You said it's,
Yes.
You don't know the name brand?
No, I was briefly looking up. So I was telling you about the Hollyland. I guess they have a monitor that has like a transmitter / receiver. So with the setup I currently have, let's start there, is like a Shinobi monitor. And if I do want to send a signal out, I had, before they broke, set the Hollyland, like an older generation transmitter and receiver combo, and I really liked it. It was very like a powerful tool, right, if you need that capability. But the older generations, they have like very finicky antennas, which the newer ones, it's more robust and they don't stick out as far. But like I was telling you, they have this this cool monitor that allows you to like monitor, like let's say you had 2 transmitters, and then if you had one monitor, you could flip between them, and it's really nice. But there was like a third-party brand that has the same identical transmitter receiver combo, but has a pass-through. So the original ones, that the Hollyland doesn't have a pass-through. So if you're using like a Shinobi monitor, let's say, you don't have that ability to pass through and to monitor there and then send it out again. So if you had a Ninja 5, you'd be able to go from your camera to the monitor, out to the transmitter, and then off to another receiver. But in this case, the third-party company that makes this new transmitter, it has a pass-through, so you can send it to your monitor and then also out. But
We'd send it to the transmitter, and then from the transmitter, wirelessly out to like the director monitor or the producer monitor.
You just have 2 separate. Ow! What?
And then you'd send to your monitor as well from that transmitter. Yeah, send me a link to that. I'd like to check it out. I'm not.
That's pretty sweet.
I don't think I've needed anything like that recently, but it's always good to have in your back pocket. I feel like just to have a reference monitor for client, for talent, for hair and makeup, for whoever.
Yes.
Just to say, here you go, here's your signal.
And something to keep your, I don't know, legacy gear chugging.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a good option.
Yeah, the Shinobis are great. I'm still using the Shinobi 1 because the Shinobi 2 is not for me. Maybe the Shinobi 3.
Yeah, I don't know why they made the Shinobi 2 the way they did. There were so many complaints, and it seemed pretty obvious that most of those weren't going to work out. I don't know if they consulted anyone who used that product or...
I just think in engineering design, there's so many compromises that get made for all the various teams competing for, it's got to be smaller, it's got to be, cheaper, or like it can't be more expensive, but it has to be better, it has to be brighter, it has to be all these things, like always increasing the upgrades and then going, but I don't want those things because they all come with some kind of baggage, some kind of cost. It's not just, it's brighter. Well, now it eats more battery life and now it runs hotter. Okay, we got to cool it down, but it's got to be smaller. So
yeah.
There's always a trade-off.
I don't know if anyone was anticipating like the evolution of battery technology either. I know we talked about it previously, but I didn't necessarily think that I'd be able to run everything off of a battery mounted to the monitor itself. So, a consideration I don't think they were even thinking of when they came out with the Shinobi 2, like designing, that, because you were saying the fan on the back gets covered up by the battery. So
whether it's a dummy or whether it's the actual battery, either way, it's blocking the exhaust port.
And again, why?
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's this tendency nowadays, and I still see it on social media or wherever, where they're rigging out the camera, like building it every single time. You sent me a link, I want to say, or maybe I just saw it, where it's the follow focus and it's wireless follow focus, but then you got to run power for it, and you're constantly doing all this power management, all this cable management, just building this giant monstrosity of tentacles and different things. You sent me the clip of Mr. Beast. He did the Beast games, and it's a time code for every GoPro.
GoPros, yeah.
And there's a lot of complexity just inherent to what we do that I'm always looking for the ways to strip out the complexity.
Yeah.
How do I streamline? How do I simplify? But there's just so many things that are just a given. Like, you just have to wire up 5 different things to make it all work. I go, I'd rather just, can we get it down to one cable? Can we get it down to just...
Which I don't know what that is about, because a lot of the projects we do, like if it's not like like let's say there's no like strict budget on it, and then but you also are battling like with your own creativity and how much effort you want to put into it, right? So I'm always kind of like walking that line every time I'm like building out my kit for what to bring to a shoot, because I'm just like, okay, how many lights do I actually need versus how many lights do I think would look cool if I started, playing with light in the background. But then once you start adding another light, then of course you're thinking of, okay, that's another C stand, that's another, gobo arm, that's another extension cord, that's another, like how many other things do I need to bring? Filters, right? If your color isn't, capable of changing colors. Another modifier, that's another thing you have to pack. If it's not just, a cone, you're going to have to bring like what size modifier, so many things that go into it just by adding one light. But it's like, what do you want? Do you want it to look good? Do you want it to be in your reel? Or do you just want to get paid quickly and like be out the door?
I think there's always a balance between the two. I think you can go down any rabbit hole far enough to where you have 20 lights or you have, 5, 8 cameras. We have a board that can run 8 inputs, and we've definitely maxed it out. But then we've also said, well, we really only need these four inputs is kind of the main thing. So I think as long as you get your main things right, yes, you can have more bells and whistles. You can have your little accents and practicals when it comes to lighting or just anything. I even just made a video talking about color correction, color grading, how that's a never-ending rabbit hole of, perfection of which LUT, exporting LUT. And you sent the thing recently of like Lumetri has a whole settings panel of, are you doing display color management?
Yep.
What gamma are you viewing in? Are you 2.4, 2.2, 1.96? Because that's QuickTime. You're always picking something and then sacrificing something else because whatever you start catering towards means you're not going for those other things. So I think you just got to pick whatever makes the most sense. And for me, it's like getting the main things right, having the right cameras. You don't need 20 cameras. For I guess the beast games, you probably do need 100 cameras for something like that scale.
If you want to make sure you're capturing every angle and reaction, yeah. Because like in that case, that's just like an insurance policy. Like we're going to spend the money on these cameras to ensure that we don't miss an angle, because that's the thing. It's like, well, if you don't get it, then you spent all this money to create the games themselves or whatever, and then it's like, well, with an extra $200 we could have made sure we had that shot. So
but even at that level, you are making some kind of sacrifice. Not every camera, I think, either the FX9 or the FX6 they were running, but like some of them were GoPros. Some of them were like, you always have to stop somewhere and say, not everything can be an FX9.
Right. And
not everything can be an FX6.
That's something I had to take into consideration recently, because I was building a job to do like a show, right? And for a series, like multiple episodes, all that stuff. So you're trying to weigh, it's like, well, what's the budget? And then what's feasibly like something that somebody can operate and it's not going to be like a nuisance, right? So on the very low end, it's like, okay, we're going to have to deal with like battery swaps and everything. But on the very high end, it's like a very like robust camera package. And do you want to, run around with that huge thing all day? So it's like finding out like the right camera, but then you have to educate people. So like the camera I ended up going with, because the budget, like ideally it would have been like the FX6, right? Built-in NDs, right? You have batteries that are like capable, everything's kind of built into the camera, but the budget did not call for that. And I don't know if you've looked at like lens rentals, borrow lenses, anything. If you switch camera body from like an FX3 to a FX6, it almost like doubles, right? Not taking into account any other accessories you might want to add on to it. So it's something that is like immediately taken into consideration. And then of course, if you don't go with something with NDs built in, then you got to add in those. And then the like other adapters that we've, come across that make our lives easier, but nobody necessarily knows about them. That UU rig ND, like, or it's a filter adapter basically that like allows you to put like on an ideally 82 millimeters is like the biggest ring size that you'd want on a lens. So that you can adapt any lens to 82 millimeters, right? So this adapter screws onto the front, and then it has like a little hinge device, and then you can put like a ND filter on there, and then swing it away, So you don't actually have to like take off the ND, put it in your pocket, whatever. You could just swing it out of the way and then shoot without one and then swing it back. It's better than magnets as well, because if you had a magnet one, you'd take off the ND and put it somewhere.
Where does it go? Yeah.
Right. And it's better than a matte box, because matte box is just obnoxious. It's yeah, it looks cool. It looks very, like, you're a cinematographer or whatever. But
You're a real professional if you have a matte box.
But yeah, it's just like not feasible, especially, today, if you're trying to compete with just people filming on their phones for content. It's like you want to, get something high quality, but be able to run and gun.
Though that swing away filter, every time I look for it, I search swing away filter, because that's what it is, right? Mm-hmm. But it's not called that. On Amazon, you can maybe find it if you search rapid filter system.
I've always just rig. That's the only one. I think on eBay is the only place that
eBay. You can find them on Amazon. There's like one link to it, but it always changes. And if anytime you're looking for any kind of filter threads, you get the never-ending list of variable ND filters.
Yes.
And then you have to pick if you search rapid filter system,
I'll have to make a video about that and like going over like why it's the best thing ever. But
it is good as long as you're not trying to shoot too wide.
Right. Anything past like I would say a 24 millimeter, you're pretty safe. At a 35, you're safe for sure.
Which is you're saying this is the one lens to rule them all.
Oh yeah.
You have to streamline. You have to pick one lens. It's the
35 to 150, the f2 to a 2.8. Tamron makes one of that lens. There's a lot of speculation. They don't think Sony would ever make a lens like that, just because it would kind of kill a lot of their other lenses. But I recently used this lens, and it's the greatest lens ever to keep things looking more or less cinematic. At a 35, you're not too wide, but you're wide enough. Because what I've found shooting at like a 24 millimeter, you get that weird, like nobody's in the room kind of feel if you're too wide without
like a
something.
Concert or something.
Yeah. So yeah,
it looks empty even if it's full.
Yeah. And if you're in the far back and then nobody's immediately in your I don't know, foreground,
or if they are, they're like a giant head.
Yeah,
because you're too wide.
And it's just like not a good cinematic look.
Right.
But at 35, that changes the game. Then you're like, okay, this looks pretty good. And then you get that ability to get like a really close focus, but still look wide, right? So you get really shallow depth of field at an f2. And it's just the perfect lens. Aside from it doesn't have like stabilization, which for the way I shoot, I'm pretty like, I don't know, still when I do most of my shooting. So it plays into my strengths of, just needing a very fast lens that has a lot of range. And at a 150, you can get, great, separation with your subject. So probably the best like interview lens as well.
Oh yeah.
Just because, again, the drastic difference, you can shoot like at a 50 millimeters and then at 100 or 150, 85, whatever.
Yeah, it covers a huge, that prime range, if those were primes, that covers a huge range of what I would be using.
And it's so fast.
Yeah.
It is a heavy lens. That's the only other thing. I noticed like my arms were like dead tired the next day because I was used to shooting with the 24 to 105. That lens is stabilized, but it's, much lighter lens.
It's an f4.
Yeah, an f4. And it's a good lens, but, the reach I can get with the 150 is just, it's insane.
Is there any significant difference between the Tamron version or the Samyang Rokinon versions?
From what I've seen online, as far as like people testing, it's just the like that drift that you get if you don't like lock the lens, let's say. So if you were a photographer and you had it like strapped around you, it would kind of like extend just by the weight of it. So
which one does it?
The Tamron does not do that.
Okay.
The other ones do. Allegedly, according to the videos I've seen, where people actually have tested them. But I also bought mine refurbished, so it was at, a steep discount from a new lens.
I wonder if there's any like hacks for that. Like put a little coating of something on the barrel to give it a little more friction, so it's not.
I thought you were saying like how to buy lenses cheap.
No. To fix the sag or whatever. What do you call that when the lens kind of
the drift is what people kind of refer to it as. I don't know.
Saggy lens.
Sag. But for me, again, if you're shooting video, I'm more or less horizontal. Like you're like.
And that's not really a top-down lens anyway. I wouldn't rig that overhead to point down. So.
No.
Not a problem either way, probably. But I wonder
No.
if there is like a way a coating or something you could put on it to give it more grip.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, no.
Not WD-40. The
Otherwise,
opposite.
use prime lenses if you're really worried about that.
Yeah.
That drift. It's like, yeah, it's not worth it.
That's probably more common with, because is that one?
We used to have a Sigma lens that drifted. It was that 24 to 70.
Yeah.
That huge lens.
Yeah, and some lenses it happens over time where they just get old and worn out and they kind of end up sagging more.
Which, again, I've never had an issue with, even if I'm like running around with it. I don't think it would ever be an issue for me.
I'm wondering, does it happen more? So there's that 35 to 150. Is that a internal zoom where
No.
like it?
No,
so
it actually does
Yeah,
extend.
because I want to say that's when it's more common.
Mhm.
I don't know if there's any lenses that have internal zoom mechanisms that do that same function where the gravity pulls them down.
No, not that I've ever.
Like I've never noticed on the 70 to 200 or anything like that.
Yeah, no.
Well,
so.
I want to play around with it. I can't say I would use the E mount version, but if the L mount, I might be interested in picking up. But it, like you said, it's big. It's kind of heavy,
It's big and heavy.
and that's not my favorite range to play with.
Could be though.
It could be.
For events, it's
Totally.
really nice because like I'm focused on just getting cinematic shots, and it's the perfect lens to get the most cinematic shots and the widest range. That is something that, like, I don't know, I would be interested in looking at with that shallow depth of field that's not too shallow. Because I feel if you have some like photography lenses that are a 1.2, it's like that's just ridiculous. Like nothing should be that shallow. So, but yeah, an f2, that's that's pretty fast.
On full frame, yeah.
That's probably like the fastest I would want to go. Because anything shallower than that, like I've done interviews at a 1.4. And it's just not what you want to do because like their eye is in focus and like the rest of their face isn't even in focus. So yeah, a 2.8, perfect. For a 100 millimeter, anything above that looks so good.
Is there anything, because it's the new year, 2025, anything new or exciting on your radar this year that you're looking forward to or hoping?
Well, you were telling me about Lumix hopefully dropping a new camera.
Hopefully.
I don't know if. I think that would be the ideal move. I do like the idea of using those new Laowa full frame anamorphic lenses, the 1.5. Those just look amazing. And I was excited that, it's a cheaper alternative because wanting to shoot anamorphic with like actual good glass is so expensive.
So expensive.
I think their kit is less than $6,000.
Yeah, for the set.
So it's, affordable, but it's also not $60,000. So
But that's what you'd be looking forward to, anamorphic.
if Lumix drops a full frame camera that does decently in low light, because I was talking to you about that, what the low light capability was for your full frame, but you haven't necessarily pushed it to that limit.
Yeah, with the S5 Mark II, I haven't needed to. My problem is almost always the opposite, that I have too much light, and I'm constantly having to use ND filters.
On the lowest ISO.
Yeah, because the base
Yeah.
ISO these days is 640
Yeah.
on some of these cameras. I don't know if any of them are 800. The GH7, I want to say it's like 500, but it's still like a decently high ISO in log. You can switch to a standard profile to shoot at an ISO 100 to kind of compensate that. But if you think of the difference between like ISO 100 to 200 is one stop, 200 to 400 is another stop, and then 400 to 800 is another stop.
Right.
So it's, arguably 3 stops extra that you're getting or starting at your base ISO.
And you're never shooting at night, right? Because that's the thing. It's like
I
whenever
mean-
someone talks about the low light capabilities of a camera, it's usually like wedding photographers or something
Yes,
like that, or
it's dim,
videographers.
yeah.
And they actually do need that, which I feel like most people, you don't need that. Like I shoot restaurants. It's like, well, there's probably a lot of light in a
Decently
restaurant.
lit, yeah.
It's like, or you bring your own lights.
And even in some place that's kind of moody. Now, granted, for photography, it's different because you need that fast
Yeah.
shutter.
Yeah.
But for video, it's always been so weird to me. People saying like, oh, I need low light, low light, low light, low. I'm like,
Unless you're
are you
shooting at
like,
120?
the moonlight, on a cloudy evening.
I'm shooting super high frame rate.
Well, sure, yes. If your frame rate's higher, then yes,
Yeah.
you need a faster shutter. But just for general purpose video, the lenses are so fast, the base ISOs are so high that I'm constantly needing to like indoors. I'm ND8
Right.
sometimes.
That's
know?
wild.
Right.
Where are you shooting indoors with an ND8?
where it's just like well lit.
Okay, yeah, just a lot of lights overhead. Yeah,
just a decently lit space that's like bright and airy. Now, granted, there's some places like maybe like restaurants and bars where it's a little moodier. That it's always going to vary. But I find that most of the stuff, certainly outdoors, obviously we need ND filters, but there's plenty of places now where I'm never at like a lack of light. That's happened a handful of times, but not enough to where I could really say, oh yeah, the S5 Mark II is great in low light.
Yeah.
I would assume the A7S3 is better just because it has the lower megapixel count, but I don't know that for a fact. I would have to test it, but I'm sure the S5 Mark II is certainly cleaner than anything I've shot Lumix Micro Four Thirds. So just off the bat, I've shot up to like ISO 6400, and like that's been great.
Yeah.
I've never gone like the 12,800 or anything like up that high where it gets a little.
It's really only when you
256,000
need to see in the dark. Like that's,
which
and
is
that happens. Again, the stuff that I shoot, I need that sometimes. Which I'm like, all right,
right,
like a concert where it's just like
backstage.
Literally, yeah, backstage, no lights whatsoever aside from like a headlamp, and then all of a sudden that becomes, a huge light source.
But you don't like to put the light on the camera ever?
No, not front light. I mean, I just think that's a weird, like that's
it's not cinematic.
It's an intentional look if you want it to look that way. Like I've done that where it's like a wider lens, and like I'm looking for that intentionally, like like a fisheye, front flash kind of look. But it's very rare. Not all the time. I just like to figure out like where my light is and then go around my subject until I think it looks cool. And I'm like, this is a good angle based on what's in the room, the light that's in the room.
I think we could see a lot of refreshes this year when it comes to cameras, because it feels like the A7S III is certainly old at this point.
Oh yeah.
You've got,
but it's still so good.
Oh yeah. There's I mean, nothing from the last 10 years is bad. We're still shooting the GH5. You could. So there's nothing wrong with anything. Just because it's old doesn't mean it's outdated. But the new stuff I could see coming this year, could be a big year for new releases and refreshes for some of the major lineup kind of things. Like there could be an FX3 Mark II.
I don't know what they would add to it. Unless it was the electronic ND, that would be nice.
That would be cool.
I don't know anything else that I want though.
Just like a newer, more modern sensor, probably.
More dynamic range would be nice.
Yeah.
More dynamic range and NDs. Like that's what everyone wants. Yeah, I don't think anyone wants like a higher frame rate. Because otherwise, like go with one of those Chronos cameras. It's like get a camera dedicated to shooting high frame rate. Yeah. Like I don't want a Swiss Army knife camera in general. It's like no. Like,
I do.
If 60 would be like my max.
But a Swiss Army knife doesn't mean it can shoot 1,000 frames per second.
But like why like a skill tree, right? It's like why level up that part of the skill tree? It's
I agree with that.
Go for dynamic range. Go down that skill tree only. Like we've reached the amount of frames per second I want in the resolution I need. Go over there, like do NDs. Go, focus on something that actually could benefit. But
I don't know. I have to test because the Lumix cameras can shoot 6K, but it's 420, and I'm always skeptical of the 420. Is 4K 422 or 6K 420? Which one?
I don't know. I've never
put them side by side to really know the difference. I've gone for 6K when I've needed the resolution, and I've gone for 4K 422 when I've just said, I need something general purpose. But I could see things evolving that way. 8K is certainly becoming more and more the standard. Do you see YouTube? You can play 8K now?
I don't have a monitor that's capable of viewing it at 8K.
I bet they'll start rolling out pretty soon.
Do you really need 8K to watch on your phone, though?
It's not about what you need. It's about what they want to sell. Because they're
about
4K.
That's what I was just going to say.
4K TVs are like $100.
But also Netflix charges you extra to view, higher resolution content.
Right. Because if you're going to...
And then you need the bandwidth.
Yeah.
So then
your internet,
you're getting charged every turn by your internet provider.
So let's just go back to VHS tapes. I got those. I can play them for free.
Like, I'm gonna make a whole new streaming service that's just HD, 1080p. Yeah, 1080 is the max resolution you need.
720. That's where
720.
That wasn't full HD. That was just HD. And then full HD.
Full HD is
or 1080i. Go back to
What's
1080i.
UHD?
Ultra HD. That's 4K.
So not UHD.
Not UHD is 3840 by 2160. 4K is technically, what is it, 4096 by something. Like UHD is not 4K because it's not 4000, but everyone calls it the same. 4K, UHD, it's all
just HD.
Yeah, but you'll see 8K for sure because 4K TVs are becoming so cheap. They need the new thing that's going to get you to buy it. So now it's 8K, and then you're gonna be like, oh man, I need an 8K camera.
So good at its current state, and
well,
I think it's a 4K TV.
Yeah.
But I couldn't imagine more resolution.
You need way more resolution for spatial video. So if you're doing anything with the Oculus or the Apple Vision, which is now kind of like...
I'm sure that's how people are going to be consuming content.
Some people are.
With the whole headgear.
And you need, like 8K is the minimum. I think like 8K is like basically... Well, I don't think it's standard
8K
def.
for what? What are you looking at?
For your field of view.
For 180 degrees?
I think so, yeah.
8K?
That's kind of the minimum.
That's a lot.
You'd want more.
Yeah, that's a lot to cover. 8K.
Yeah, but you need the
that's what I'm saying.
gear to do it.
It should be, what's the equivalent of the resolution of 4K if you're trying to cover 180 degrees? Is that like 16K resolution? Like how much resolution do you need?
Well, it's always going to be dependent on what the screen in front of your eyeball is getting.
Right.
So like the screens in the Apple Vision, I want to say are like around 4K per eye, I think. And so you probably do need 8K total resolution in your file to like fill that. But the moment the displays get better,
Right.
if you get 8K per eye, then you're going to need either 16K or however the math works out.
Too much.
64K.
Too much resolution.
Well, what is it? There is the Ursa Mini 12K.
Well,
And do they have a 16K coming? Am I just hallucinating that?
Didn't they say that?
Yeah, they had some big announcement. They're like, we're working on it, and it's 16K, I think.
Wild. Again, nobody asked for that. Nobody needs more resolution. They need more dynamic range. Because what's more realistic?
For general purpose,
More resolution
yes.
or more dynamic range? Like what would look more realistic to you? More dynamic range. I don't need to.
It depends. It depends on how it gets graded.
I don't need to see something blown out in 8K. You know what I mean?
But I also want it to be sharp and have resolution.
I don't want to see 8K noise. You know, it's like, this is stupid.
I don't know. I think that dynamic range is a selling feature, but it doesn't usually matter to your general consumer. Until people are educated more, they're not going to care about dynamic range as much as you care about dynamic range or I care about it. Because yes, I agree.
But imagine, okay, so you sent me something recently. It was like the Squid Games character, the main character.
Aging?
456 or whatever. Yeah, aging throughout the years.
Yeah,
right?
from back in his 20s to now he's in his 50s.
Yeah, back in his 20s. In his early days, because now he's in his 50s. In his early days, it was like 2004 or whatever, 2005.
It was the 90s.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah, 96,
Still,
97.
It looked so modern. Like everything was like, okay, yeah, this looks like it could have been shot 10 years ago.
Yeah.
You know? But like he has been a star in an era where resolution wasn't so bad in like the late 90s coming into 2000s. And then from then on, it's like high quality stuff. And then whoever made the video obviously didn't have very compressed files. So it looked all pretty cohesively good, right? Quality-wise. But then obviously he's aging so much in the video, and you're like, oh my God. But yeah, I don't know. I think, I feel like if there was more, you'd be able to see a more drastic difference if the videos were just like, I can see so much dynamic range. Like this is different than what we've been locked into for so many years of like a very limited dynamic range. Like, you know what a video looks like versus like if you're looking at real life.
Yeah.
It's like you'd be able to see that difference very clearly. Like when the iPhone started doing like, not like raw video, but it was like HDR video. I was like blown away. I was like, this is incredible. When is my camera going to get this? Like my actual camera going to get that? But I think they started putting it in drones. Like the DJI drones have them.
HDR now.
HDR video.
Yeah, it's certainly it doesn't look like a movie, but it has a look.
It looks fake.
Yeah.
Like it looks, but if I was wanting something in my phone, that's what I would want. That I would want a feature that captures like HDR because it's the most dynamic range. Because ideally, if you have a phone, you're trying to capture something just to have it on file, right? It's like I just want to make sure I captured it. It's like I want, the widest net possible when I capture this information. And if that's HDR, that's fantastic because then I don't have to choose like, oh, okay, this is a very bright part of the image. I'm going to expose for that and then lose half my image because it just happened to be in the, shadows. But yeah, I wonder if cameras are going to go more AI or if they're going to truly develop a sensor that's like, here's 20 stops of dynamic range, but everything's still very manual. Or are they going to come out with a camera like, we have a new sensor, it's AI and it's HDR, and then you're like, oh no. Like, what do you think?
It'll probably be both. It'll just be for different markets. There'll be the amazing sensor, the actual new best of the best, super expensive for your like RE style cameras and your cinema files, and then you'll have your cheap mass produced thing that's AI and HDR and they've
like a prosumer camera would have the AI.
Yeah, I think they'll start baking that into more because it's now becoming part of the marketing for some of the autofocus features in the new Canon.
That makes sense.
R5 Mark II.
Yeah,
They've
Sony's
hyped up
been
like,
announcing
we have a
that
new
as well.
AI chip that does X, Y, and Z and can follow your subject behind,
Yep.
Which is kind of cool. And I think it'll go more that route.
I like
for
that.
marketing. Yeah,
That's a good feature.
yeah,
It makes sense.
yeah.
But when it comes to like the visual quality of like a weird AI HDR image, I think that's when it's going to get creepy. Of like, this doesn't look right yet. Versus continuing to develop the technology of like, okay, this is good. Let's get it better and better and better. Versus like, let's take this AI route real quick.
I don't know what'll be because there's definitely a what do you call it? Not a fulcrum, a pivot point. Something will change in the near future where the things that are valued it changes. You've seen that now with the camcorder trend. People wanting it to be more vintage, wanting it to be more retro, being more hip, nostalgic.
Apple does
not
it all the time.
Caring about resolution or the perfect image because AI is getting there where it can make that for you. It'll go, here you go, here's your perfect video, drone shot of whatever you want. And so I think there'll be a lust for something more real, more tangible. And I don't know what the answer to that will be, but I just think that there's a wave of AI content coming that people will look for something different because they'll say, I've had enough of that. I've had enough of the hyper realistic.
Well, you were saying the new trend for kids is to go back to the mall.
The mall is cool.
So
again,
maybe that's a thing.
Hollister in the mall.
They're tired of consuming content on their phone. They just want to experience. Like, what's more? What's better than 8K resolution? looking at the mall.
Real life. Look at my man, guys.
Looking through my own eyes.
Holy cow! No, there's the doomer part of me that says phones and screens and everything is just so addicting. It will only continue to get better because there's the path of least resistance, right? It's hard to unplug and just be bored and go sit in nature. It's the best thing for you, but it's very hard to do. And I think by and large, most people will just default to what's convenient, what's cheap, what's free, and just consume entertainment that way. Unfortunately. But I don't know how that actually ends up playing out over the next 10 or 20 years. Because, no one does. And the stuff is changing so fast, it's hard to keep track.
It's, like, especially in our industry, like YouTubers are, like, they get burnt out. And, like, that's a thing. Like, any content creator says, like, I was just burnt out. And whether that's them just chasing what the algorithm tells them is successful, and that's, producing a piece of video every hour on the hour, right? And then you can get burnt out that way. But I wonder if it's just like editing styles. Of course, like everything's so like flashy in your face, cut every second. Do you think like how we as, adults just being able to see the trajectory of content over time and we can see it and just immediately be turned off by it. But do you think kids have gotten to a point now where because everything like Squid Game just came out season 2 and everyone finished it in like 5 hours, 7 hours, right? It's like it took 3 years, finish it in, 5 hours. But for kids, like if they're original, like, I finally got a phone, and then they're watching all this content and like kids get over stuff quick. Like they get tired of toys and move on. Do you think like they've like moved on from just consuming?
Not
TikTok?
from the kids I've seen.
No? Okay.
They're
I
they're
only have
glued to
like
it.
2 nieces that I can kind of like
Yeah.
like see what they're kind of like, you know, consuming. Like it's a lot of it's YouTube, and you know, it's a lot of like, you know, fashion bloggers and stuff. But their content isn't quick cut. It's like, here's a tutorial on like how to put on whatever makeup, right? And I wonder, because the content I like is Chef's Table, 8, you know, second long clips or whatever. It's not quick cut whatsoever, right? But I wonder, yeah, if kids are just turned off by the new way of how content's just shown at them.
What did I hear? That Netflix is, I don't know if this is true or not, but they're trying to put it into their programming, their production principles, or guiding kind of the rule book. Have characters say what they're doing while they're doing it in case someone isn't watching the show.
I heard that, yeah.
I believe it.
I suppose, but that would also be like such a weird way to make content, to script it along those lines, to make sure that like your story has certain words in there to describe what they're doing. Like, that's weird.
It is weird, but that's
how a book is.
Oh, yeah.
That's how a book's written.
And that's the thing. I don't think so. There's the era of before color, where everything was black and white.
Sorry, I just got like an image in my mind of like, you know, a true script, like what's in between the lines, like literally.
Just blank pages.
No, it gives you like the exposition of like what's happening.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, Macy walks into the through the front door. I wonder, I'm walking through the front door. You know, they're just read the whole script at that point.
I'm here. Yeah, I'm walking in.
I'm walking through the front door.
Okay, cool. I'm cooking eggs in the kitchen.
Cooking eggs in the kitchen. Can you smell them? I'm sure you can smell them. Yes.
They smell delicious.
Oh, it smells delicious. It smells like applewood.
Yeah, it'll feel weird to watch those shows, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So there's the era before color, which is black and white, which my kids look at, and even I looked at growing up, going, "This is old," even though it wasn't that old.
Like Three Stooges old, like black and white.
Yeah, what was
and
it?
then you find out that it was just cheaper to shoot in black and white film. They had color the whole time.
Yeah. So there's that where technology advanced and it drew a line. And then once we got color and then editing was good and the sound was good and everything kind of got good, there's an era, I think, of filmmaking that is still watchable to this day. Yeah. It's still good. It's still entertaining. The stories are...
Yeah, if it's good writing, like some of the Twilight Zone episodes are classics, right? Even though it's... Oh, you don't like Twilight Zone?
Well, is it black and white? Because Twilight Zone was black and white.
I'm just saying, like, it's a show that, like, you know,
Yes.
is a super long tenure. But, like, certain episodes just, like... It's just a good, well-written episode. You know, it's a good story.
And there's things that change, obviously, like people's clothing will change or technology will change. But there's even like period pieces that have been done that are still watchable. Like you could probably watch Titanic today and have roughly the same experience that when Titanic came out 30 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's about the same movie because not that much has changed in terms of the
If you
the
watched
parts of that.
the original Lord of the Rings, you'd be like, some of the animation, like Scorpion King.
Well, okay, but that's different than Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is still good. It holds up. There's some lighting choices that are a little bit of the time, but
like some effects.
yeah, Scorpion King, that's
comic.
that was comically bad at the time. You know,
Okay.
people saw that and were like, "Oh, this is terrible." Like the Mummy still holds up. You said you
the
just watched
original
it.
Mummy.
Yeah, it still holds
Yes.
good.
Oh, it's great. Yeah.
Still, so those principles are the things that I'm looking for to factor into my own content, to give it that longevity, to not follow the trend or the fad of like the super hyper cut. Because there was that era, similarly, okay, talking about styles. Mission Impossible 2 is the universally like hated Mission Impossible. It's the worst one.
I don't think I've seen it.
Because it's so stylish of the 2000s. The soundtrack is Limp Bizkit, directed by John Woo. It has slow motion and doves and motorcycles and leather because it is so much a 2000s movie. And that's the kind of stuff that I would say don't lean into the trend of today.
Yeah.
Find the things that are more evergreen.
It's like the Vin Diesel meme of like, this is the coolest a human being could look in like 2000.
Yes.
And it's just like him just wearing like these weird, like you know, these weird glasses.
The Riddick meme. Yes,
Yeah,
that's from Pitch Black, where he was like so cool.
Yeah, this is the coolest.
And now it's lame. So so there's movies that have been made and content that has been made that feels of its time, And that's the stuff that gets dated pretty quick. And people are currently making that.
Yeah.
They're actively right now. Someone is making the thing that'll be like, oh, dude, that was so 2025.
Well, you're talking about like a Sharknado movie where it's like you're just playing into like the trend and then you just keep going down that, that well. It's like, well, might as well keep making it.
Yeah, or even just using the pop culture music of the time. Oh, man, this track is so fire. I got to use it. And then you look back and you go, oh, dude,
Yeah.
that's so lame. Because it's Limp Bizkit or it's whoever, which now is probably cool.
But
again.
if enough time passes, right, then it's all of a sudden
Then,
cool again.
cool,
Because, who knows?
It's ironic.
Back when Footloose came out, do you think everyone was like, oh, this song? Like, you would use this song in the movie? Oh, it's so lame.
Typical.
So
I like to create content that has that feeling of you could watch this anytime in the future, and it's not about the style. It is just about the content, what's captured.
yeah. I forget what movie. I'm trying to, like, Tarantino is known for using like iconic songs in certain scenes, which makes sense. Because like you can, like, if you listen to a song, you're like, oh, I could imagine this taking place during this song. Not because it's like so literal with the lyrics, but just like the way the song makes you feel, right? It's like if you watch like old cartoons, it's like classical music, but certain ways like that instruments sound, it conveys a certain action that might be on screen. It could be like running, it could be like being scared, whatever it is. But yeah, no, it's interesting. And then I know even nowadays, like looking on Artlist, trying to find stock music that just sounds good for an edit, it's so difficult, one, to find something that like hasn't been used in a commercial that you've seen
You
recently.
don't recognize it?
Yeah, you have to, one, not recognize it. You can't go for the staff picks ever, right? It's like this one obviously has been used, right? Which sucks because sometimes it is a good song. But being able to, source good music that makes sense for what you're making is probably like one of the hardest parts in making content, like an elevated piece of content. Like recently, we've been working on like more like masterclass, like more like bigger content, and finding enough music, to cover all of what you want to cover is just very difficult, I think. But I don't know. How often do you go about like dissecting movies or like documentaries? Like, do you ever do that? Like, take the time to just be like, all right, like, it's one thing to go and watch something and figure out like how they shot it, as far as, looking at the lighting and everything, but dissecting like the music choice or like how the song like ramps up or when a song ends. Because I know you have like a pet peeve of like songs ending.
I have a pet peeve of them fading.
Right, yeah. Like how
it needs to end.
right?
It needs to end. You can't just fade out.
But if you listen to... Right. But again,
where'd the music go?
Yeah.
Oh, you're just lazy, just put a crossfade on there?
Right. So like ideally it would have an ending. With most things, it would have like a proper ending.
Correct.
But
every
also,
sentence needs a period at the end. Every music song, every track needs to end.
But then there's also like certain editing techniques where like, ooh, it could be a funny thing if the music just stops. Yeah. And then the person says something funny. It could be an editing technique. So like there's different things like that are like moves that you can learn as an editor.
Yes. They're kind of like moves. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. But do you ever do that? Like watch something and you're just like, I want my style to reflect this. So it's not only how it looks, it's like how to make it edit that way. But in, my example earlier, it's like trying to find the music alone is like hard enough.
Yeah. I'm never looking to copy something because that's like back in the video Copilot days. Andrew Kramer would put out
the tools.
He'd put out a tutorial and everyone would be like, check out my demo reel, what I did. And it's like, dude, you just did that off video Copilot.
I made this fireball.
Come on, Andrew Kramer. That's his reel. So I never want to copy and like watch a movie and be like, oh, I want to make something just like this. But almost every time I'm watching something, whether it's a YouTube video, a TV show, a movie, listening to a song, I am always trying to pull out a lesson for myself of, oh yeah, that's interesting how they did that. The recent one that I made a video on is the Iron Claw. Did you see this?
Yeah, I've seen that movie.
Did you like it?
No.
Why not? Why didn't you like it?
I didn't like it. I didn't think the acting, I thought it was just too awkward. Maybe it's just because I'm like, I knew what Zac Efron looked like before, and it just it was just so weird that I was like, I can't watch this movie because it just kept weirding me out the whole time.
Okay, so the visuals
But-
are off-putting. I could sort of understand.
I
that.
kind of thought so, but I don't know. Maybe it was.
Did you finish the movie or you stopped?
I stopped.
Okay.
I was like, this is so weird. Can't watch this.
So sure, I will agree with the visuals can be a little strange, especially if you're. There's many things that are like that where you just don't like the vibe of it or whatever.
Because, yeah, well, the visuals for one, but then it looked like it was trying to be profound.
Oh.
You know, like the whole way through, and I don't know, maybe that was just like body language as well, but maybe it was on purpose because it's wrestling and they want to like.
I didn't have that. I didn't have that it was trying to be profound. I thought everything about it was very simple and humble and quaint, which I enjoyed quite a bit. I liked just hanging out in that atmosphere. I liked hanging out with those characters. It felt very much just like a family of brothers, which I have 3 brothers, so I was like, I related to it that way. And I was like, yeah, I just like hanging out with these people. It's like kind of like a cool thing, what they're up to, this whole wrestling, dynasty they're trying to create. Obviously,
Like the Jackson 5, but wrestling.
Yeah, and obviously it is all very sad and unfortunate what ends up happening. The lesson for me in that movie was paying attention to the editing and how much there wasn't editing. So there was lots of long shots where it would just be 2 characters just talking to each other. And it's like, yep, that's the scene. That's all you needed. Just 2 people talking. And I don't need the shot, reverse shot, wide shot, close up. Like there's some movies where it seems like every shot they're trying to give you a new angle or a new thing to like, hey, check this out. Okay, now look, there's the background. And
But a lot of that probably has to rely on the actors themselves and their performance.
Yes.
Because then it's less of like, because being like a camera operator, for instance, like you have like your parameters of like where the people should be in your frame, but then it's up to them in order for like pacing, right? And to keep that going. So would you agree as far as like watching that movie, were they able to carry those long takes?
I thought so. And I thought it made it feel more grounded and personal and more intimate and more real rather than just, hey, pay attention because we're cutting all the time,
Right.
which seems to be kind of the classic rule of editing, like, oh, every 2 seconds, like cut to like re-engage their brain and give them something new to look at. But I thought it was quite enjoyable, the opposite of just being able to sit there and watch. Now, something's happening. I'm not looking at nothing. Those movies kill me, where it's like, here, look at 20 seconds of a tree.
Yes.
And you're like, oh, dude, come on.
Yeah.
Or here's 30 seconds of a guy staring out a window. And you're like, dude, like, no, they're characters. They're having the plot, the conversation's moving forward, but I only have the one angle to look at. And then what was interesting is that there were the more action scenes, like more was happening. So there were more cuts, there was more coverage. You could just tell that they spent more time kind of filming that stuff versus, hey, just this quick conversation. And then you look at the budget for that movie, it's like 15 million, 20 million, something pretty low
And
budget.
then you understand why there were long takes.
And then I go, well, that's so smart because on the high end of the spectrum, you have Christopher Nolan and those types who, when they want to spend their money, they bring out the IMAX cameras. They're like, oh, this is the scene where we're going to use the most expensive stuff.
Yeah.
But then you think back, okay, well, like back in the day when like just buying the film was costly. So you guys do your scene, you're talking at the table, cool. All right, got it cut. Like, we're done. We're going to save our budget for the big scene where we're going to roll more film. And nowadays with digital, like recording, it's not that expensive, right? You can just fill memory cards, like the Mr. Beast Games example, just
Insane.
thousands of cameras all recording. It's just crazy the amounts of data you can process, and that can be valuable, but it's not required. You don't have to do it. So when I'm watching something like the Iron Claw, I'm going, okay, cool. So there are times where just like one camera is enough. You can make it, you don't have to overshoot, get every angle, cut, spend all this time editing, when at the end of the day, it's just 2 people having a conversation. It should be kind of simple and kind of quaint. And I liked that feeling. Of course, the cinematography, the color, the acting, all that helps.
Right. Yeah.
But, those are the lessons I'm trying to learn from anything I consume, where it's, okay, I'm not going to make a movie like this. I'm not going to do a thing about wrestling.
That is interesting.
But what can I apply to myself?
Because when you go, like, taking that approach to, like, a client gig, let's say, it's a lot easier and we've both encountered this, when somebody's really good on camera. And you don't know if somebody's going to be on camera or not, but it is like a benefit, let's say, if like obviously you're going to get B-roll to cover whatever they're going to say, but if you do the interview first and know that's like, man, I'm going to need a lot of coverage for this person. Then you can go into your B-roll knowing like, man, this person's going to be chopped up in my edit so much that I'm going to need so much extra footage or whatever it is. But yeah, like sometimes when you have a really good person on camera, you want to use that angle because they have good facial expressions, or whatever it may be. But yeah, no, I always think it's interesting just watching something on like a good network that has quality something. It could be Netflix. Sometimes Netflix has questionable quality, but a reliable show. Like I know I love Chef's Table, but more recently I've been watching like on HBO, if you've ever seen Hard Knocks.
I've only ever watched the trailers. I've never watched the actual content.
It's very interesting because Hard Knocks, and I guess it's more relatable if you've ever seen like an NFL films, like, if you've ever seen like a football spiraling in the air and then it like comes down, they catch it in the end zone in slow motion. So it's very like cinematic sports content. And I think it's fascinating watching Hard Knocks because they mix like really high-end cinema cameras with like they'll do interviews that look beautiful. Could be like in one of their facilities, and they'll light it, a really cool way. And then they'll mix it with footage from like those cameras that you do like conferences, where it's just like a camera on like a motorized head, and then you can just zoom in digitally, basically. So it's mixed in with that, which they're mic'd up, right? And then you're like, I'm sitting there wondering, it's like people pay a lot of money, right, to watch. Obviously, like in HBO, it's like you have a subscription, right? You're paying for quality. But then you're being fed stuff that has content that's not the highest, cinematic looking content. But overall, like it has the editing, it has, the music, has like the story ultimately. But you can watch it and not be offended. But I'm always, surprised when I see high quality like content, but it contains footage that I'm like, you wouldn't typically think you would expect it to see, especially if you're paying subscription. You're just like, it's interesting because you're talking about Beast Games using GoPro footage. It's like it's being accepted, right? It's not just like you don't necessarily go to a Hollywood movie, like a theater movie, and see GoPro footage.
Well, when you said that, it came to mind in The Hobbit.
There's GoPro footage?
I'm pretty sure it's GoPro footage. It's something like a GoPro because it takes you out of it. Mm-hmm. So not Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is amazing. That's sacred. The Hobbit movies, though, I believe it's in the second one. Maybe it's in the first one.
Second of the three?
It's the second one. There's the barrels going down the river. Do you know this? What I'm talking about?
I know the scene you're referring to.
Okay. There's shots, like POV shots from in the barrels that like go underwater, and they are drastically different looking than any other shot in any of those three movies.
Right.
And it takes you out of it. I don't know if it was truly a GoPro. It looks like a GoPro. It could have been some other consumer, camera that was rigged with an underwater housing or something, but it looks bad.
Bad, right.
It looks bad.
But is it bad enough where it just shouldn't be in there? Like,
yes,
is there like a level where it's
those
like,
shots should not
that's
be.
just bad,
Yeah.
like just don't even put it in there, right?
Take them out.
Yeah.
You have plenty of coverage. Yeah, I don't need POV shots of in the barrel dunking underwater.
Right.
And I think there's like 2 or 3 of them, and they're not
But
essential.
who's to say? Like
me, I'm to say
the consumer of the
I'm
product.
to say.
Like
To say it's
because then it's funny when it's a studio being like, okay, we're gonna give you $300 million. Why did you put a GoPro shot in this film? Like we gave you all this money. I just think it's funny, those things that happen. It just blows my mind.
Beast Games, it's almost it's understood because you have to.
Right.
You have so many people and contestants that to get cameras on them all, you need something like that.
And then in the Hard Knock situation, it makes sense as well because if you have a cameraman in the room, it's going to throw off their conversation. They're not going to be as candid. You're not going to get the sound bites you want. So, finding a solution which doesn't look the same, but ultimately you're getting the story that you want to tell.
Which is what I'm constantly reminded of, that at the end of the day, the thing that matters the most is the subject, is the content itself. Like what is being captured is far more important than how it's captured. They can supplement each other. They can amplify each other. Obviously, good content with good imagery is the best case scenario. But there's far too often, people trying to put lipstick on a pig.
Yeah.
oh, this is super boring, but like, let's film it with a red, let's edit it, like spend all this time editing graphics, sound effects, all this stuff for something that is really just kind of empty anyway, which is probably the worst content on Netflix or Disney or Amazon or any of these places. We're going, the writing, the part that was free, the part that, just was words on a page,
Right.
is the worst part. It looks pretty. It sounds great. The acting is whatever. The costumes, the visual effects, all great. But you're going, but I'm just kind of bored. This is kind of dull. This is kind of uninteresting versus something that I was into, which was the Iron Claw, which had none of that. And it was like super cheap and low budget,
Right.
but I was entertained the whole time just from like one camera angle for, a whole scene might play out that way. And then of course they, it is well done, well put together. And even something like Squid Game, I think is entertaining as a pretty big spectacle. There's a lot that goes into that show.
A lot of special effects.
And you go, wow, that must be expensive.
Yes.
But it's worth it because I think the actual story is really interesting too.
Right, yeah.
So
Something
it is
unique.
amplified.
Yeah.